After discovering my wife's affair, I built a new life and found an even better partner. The first thing I remember is how loud the kettle sounded. It was screaming on the stove, steam punching against the kitchen tiles, but I couldn't move to turn it off because my hands were still wrapped around my wife's phone. The screen was bright in the dim kitchen light. A little blue bubble thread open where there should have been an alarm app, and my thumb hovered over a photo I couldn't unsee. The two of them in our bed, my wife's back. The curve of her shoulder I'd kissed 1,000 times, and someone else's hand on her hip. I didn't hear her footsteps until she was in the doorway, hair wet from the shower, towel slung low, saying, "Babe, can you grab?" And then stopping when she saw her phone in my hands and whatever was written all over my face. For a second, we just stared at each other, the kettle shrieking and the smell of burnt toast lingering in the air. My mouth was dry, but the words came out anyway, shredded and sharp. "Who took this?" I asked, my voice nothing like my own. She froze, fingers tightening around the edge of the doorframe, eyes flicking from the phone to me like she was calculating how much I'd seen. "Hannah, give me that," she said, reaching out. But I stepped back so abruptly my chair skidded and smacked into the cupboard. My heart was doing this ugly, arrhythmic pounding, and all I could think, stupidly, was that the tea towels had cartoon lemons on them, and we'd argued for 20 minutes in Home Goods about whether they were too childish. "Who took it?" I asked again, louder this time, and I could feel everything in the room narrowing down to the answer. It was a Tuesday night, 6 years and 3 months into our marriage, 7.5 years since we'd met in the world's most cliché way, at a mutual friend's birthday drinks in some overcrowded bar where the music was too loud and the floor was sticky. Back then, Eliza was the woman who'd leaned in to shout a joke in my ear and ended up shouting right into my life instead. She'd been all quick wit and nervous energy, talking with her hands, apologizing every time she bumped into someone. We'd bonded over a shared hatred of coriander and a love of obscure indie bands. I remember thinking, as we stood outside waiting for our Ubers, that if I never saw her again, I'd still remember the way she laughed. Spoiler, I did see her again. A lot. We did the whole millennial queer love story. Late-night texts that turned into good morning texts, cheap wine on my too-small couch, panicking about when to introduce each other to our respective friend groups. Her parents were confused but ultimately kind when she came out. Mine said the classic, "We love you no matter what, we just worry your life will be harder" thing, and then tripped over pronouns for a year. We moved in together after 12 months because my lease was up and her roommate announced she was moving to London. And it felt easier to share a bed and bills than continue the shuttle run between 2 apartments. Getting married a couple of years later felt like the natural next step. We'd already lived through food poisoning, a job loss, and one truly terrible attempt at assembling IKEA wardrobes. If you'd asked me back then, I would have told you I was happy. Not Instagram influencer. Constant smiles happy, but real-life shared jokes. I know what brand of hummus you like without asking. Happy. Eliza wasn't perfect. Neither was I. She worked long hours at an ad agency and had a tendency to bring the stress home with her, and I could be stubborn and avoidant when things got tense. But we had routines and rituals. Friday night dumplings, Sunday morning coffee at the cafe with the wobbly table. Our stupid tradition of sending each other the worst memes we could find during boring meetings. When we fought, it was usually about small domestic things that somehow felt huge in the moment. Whose turn it was to clean the bathroom, why she always left her shoes in the middle of the hallway. Looking back, the cracks started small, like hairline fractures in a mug you keep using because it still technically holds tea. She got promoted to creative director, which was a big deal in her world. Suddenly, there were late nights at the office, client dinners, just one more round of revisions that meant she'd stumble in after midnight smelling like wine and perfume that wasn't mine. At first, I was just proud. I bragged about her to my friends. I made extra portions so she'd have dinner waiting. I told myself it was a phase. Then there was Rowan. Rowan was the new copywriter on Eliza's team. The name she dropped into conversation with the casual frequency of someone who wasn't yet aware they were saying it too often. Rowan had the funniest idea for the tagline, she'd say. Or, "Rowan totally saved my ass in that client meeting." I pictured Rowan as male at first, some bearded hipster in flannel who said things like synergy unironically. It wasn't until I saw Rowan's tag on an Instagram photo spiral earrings, shaved undercut, crooked smile that I realized Rowan was not a guy. "You'd like her," Eliza said one night, scrolling through her phone on the couch. "She's like you. Snarky." "You have a type, clearly," I joked, nudging her knee with mine. She laughed, kissed the top of my head, and went back to her screen. I don't know when my gut started twisting. Maybe the night she came home drunk and called me Ro before correcting herself too fast. Maybe when she started getting texts at 2 a.m. and claimed it was just the team venting, even as she tilted the screen away from me. Maybe when she suddenly cared a lot more about which shirt she wore on days they had big pitches together. It was nothing, she said, every time I asked. Just work. Just stress. Just me being a little paranoid. The night everything snapped, she was in the shower and her phone started buzzing on the kitchen counter while I was making tea. She usually kept it face down, but this time it was face up, lighting the whole dim room with that blue glow. A preview banner slid down from the top. A photo thumbnail and the words, "Can't stop thinking about Saturday." The contact name was a little heart emoji and R. I wish I could say I hesitated, that I had some noble impulse to respect her privacy. I didn't. My hand moved before my brain had fully caught up. I picked up the phone, unlocked it. She'd never changed her passcode. New levels of cruelty require old levels of trust, and opened the thread. There they were. Photos, messages, jokes that were too familiar, too intimate. A picture of our bedroom, our sheets, our stupid navy blue duvet cover with tiny white triangles. Eliza's back, Rowan's hand. Another of them kissing in the mirror, her hair wet, same as it was now in the shower. Texts about how they couldn't stop, and how being with me felt like going home to a roommate, now that she'd tasted something real. My body reacted before my mind did. I felt like I'd been dropped into cold water, everything buzzing and far away. The kettle clicked off by itself, and the sudden silence made the blood rushing in my ears sound like a train. I put the phone down, very gently, like it might explode, and then picked it up again because if I let go, I might fall apart. That's where Eliza found me. When I asked, "Who took this?" there was this flicker across her face like she tried on 3 different lies in half a second and couldn't get any of them to fit. "It's not what it looks like," she said, which was so insultingly stupid that I almost laughed. "It looks like you're sleeping with someone in our bed," I said. "So, unless that's your identical twin, I'd love to know what version of this I'm not understanding." She did this thing with her jaw that I'd come to recognize over the years, the clench that meant she was about to go into defense mode. "We were just messing around," she said. "It was a joke. We'd had too much to drink. Do you always take naked joke selfies with your coworkers?" I asked. My hands were shaking. I set the phone down because I didn't trust myself not to throw it at her. "And tell them that sleeping with me is like going home to a roommate?" Her eyes widened. "You went through all my messages?" she demanded, like that was the problem. "I picked up your phone because it buzzed," I said. "I saw what you didn't bother to hide. Don't make this about my curiosity when you're screwing someone else in the house we pay for together." She wrapped the towel tighter around herself as if that would somehow restore the privacy she'd already shredded. "It's not a big deal," she said, and my heart did something ugly at the minimizing. "It just happened. We've been under so much pressure. I didn't want to hurt you." "Newsflash," I said, and my voice cracked on the second syllable. "You did." What followed was the kind of fight I wouldn't wish on anyone. The kind where you both say things you've been storing up for years. All the little slights and resentments you pretended didn't matter. She accused me of not being present, of marrying my job at the clinic, of being predictable. I threw back that she was never home. That when she was home, her mind was still at the office. That I'd been begging her for months to come to therapy with me. And she'd said we didn't need a stranger to tell us how to be married. Eventually, like fights always do, it burned itself out. She cried, big ugly sobs into her hands. I cried quieter, because that's how I do it. The kind of silent weeping that makes your chest hurt. She said she was sorry, said it meant nothing, said she'd cut it off with Rowan, that she'd delete the photos, that we could get back to us if I just gave her another chance. I wish I could tell you I threw her out that night, that I was strong and righteous and packed her a suitcase while she watched. I didn't. I told her to sleep in the spare room. I lay awake in our bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the plumbing and the occasional creak of the building. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that photo. The next few weeks were a blur of alternating desperation and numbness. We went to one couple's therapy session where she performed remorse and I sat there like a ghost, answering the therapist's questions with facts instead of feelings. She swore she'd ended it. She showed me a breakup text to Rowan, then blocked her number while I watched. She hugged me like I was something fragile she was trying not to drop. And for a while, I tried. I really did. I tried to picture a version of the future where this was an ugly chapter and not the whole story. I read articles about surviving infidelity. I talked to a private therapist who asked me what I wanted, and the only honest answer I could come up with was, I want this to not have happened. The problem was I couldn't unknow what I knew. I couldn't unknow that when she'd kissed me goodnight, she'd already kissed someone else that day. I couldn't unknow that our bed had been used for something I hadn't consented to. I couldn't unknow how easily she'd lied to my face about late nights at work. The second hit came about 2 months later. I'd gone to the agency to drop off lunch because she'd left in a rush and forgotten hers. It was a small gesture, the kind you make when you're trying to reweave trust with tiny threads. I texted her from the lobby. No response. The receptionist told me she was in a meeting, but I could leave the bag on her desk. Her office door was slightly ajar. I heard voices inside. Eliza's and someone else's, low and tight. And then I heard it. I told you I'm sorting it, Eliza hissed. You can't just show up at my place, Ro. She's already suspicious enough. The silence that followed felt like someone pressing their hands over my ears. The lunch bag slid from my fingers, landing on the carpet with a dull thud. I didn't go in. I didn't make a scene. I walked out of that building on autopilot, the air feeling too thin, my legs like they belonged to someone else. That night, I told her I wanted a divorce. She reacted like I'd set the couch on fire. Shock, then anger, then bargaining. We can still fix this, she said. People survive worse. You're just throwing away what we've built over some fling. No, I said, and my voice was calmer than I felt. You threw it away when you treated me like a backup plan. Leaving our apartment was like amputating a limb. I moved into a short-term sublet with a girl from my friend's work, a place that smelled like incense and had mismatched furniture and a leak in the bathroom ceiling. I took half the plates, my clothes, my books, and the framed photo of my grandmother that had nothing to do with Eliza. Everything else I left behind because I couldn't bear the logistics of argument over who owned what. She could keep the kettle and the cartoon lemon tea towels. The bureaucratic part of the divorce was weirdly anticlimactic. We didn't have kids or a house, just some shared savings and a retirement account we'd been very proud of as lesbians in our 30s. Our lawyer divided everything in a spreadsheet, tidy rows with numbers that felt disconnected from the real cost of anything. The emotional part, though, was messy and nonlinear. Some days I felt almost okay. I'd go to work, come home, cook myself dinner, watch trash TV and think, this is fine. Other days, I'd be halfway through a patient's exercise plan when a song from our wedding playlist came on the radio, and I'd have to duck into the storage room to cry next to the foam rollers. Friends tried. They took me out for drinks, for hikes, for pottery classes. They told me I was better off. They told me I was strong. They told me Eliza was an idiot. I appreciated it, but there's a gap between knowing something intellectually and feeling it in your bones. What helped more than I expected was therapy. Not the couple's one-off performance, but honest, ugly solo sessions where I had to sit with the ways I'd minimized my own needs long before Eliza ever stepped out. I realized I'd been so busy trying to be the cool wife who didn't nag, who understood long hours and work crushes and midlife crises, that I'd swallowed every small hurt until they built a dam so big the flood when it finally cracked nearly drowned me. About a year after everything blew up, my life looked almost unrecognizable from the outside. I'd changed clinics, moved across town into a tiny one-bedroom apartment that was mine, every square meter of it. I'd taken up running, badly, and joined a book club where no one knew me as half of Hannah and Eliza, just as Hannah who liked weird novels and strong coffee. I'd gotten a tattoo on my ribcage, a small wave, because it felt like a way to reclaim my body as something that belonged to me and no one else's gaze. I hadn't seen Eliza in months when she texted asking to meet. We ended up at the same cafe with the wobbly table, because apparently I am not creative when it comes to neutral ground. She looked smaller somehow, or maybe just tired. Her hair was longer. She fiddled with the sugar packets like they'd done something to her. I'm not here to beg you to take me back, she said before I'd even sat down. I know that's not happening. Okay, I said cautiously. I just wanted to say, I'm sorry, she continued. Properly. Not the panicked, self-justifying sorry I threw at you last year. A real one. I was a coward. I hurt you. You didn't deserve it. I believed her. Or at least, I believed that she believed what she was saying. But the weird thing was, I didn't need it anymore. Not like I thought I would. It felt like watching a storm on the weather report for a different city. Important in a factual way. No longer a personal threat. Thank you, I said. I hope you're figuring your stuff out. She nodded, eyes shiny. I see a therapist now, she said, almost wry. Should have done that years ago. After that, I walked back to my new apartment, unlocked the door, and stood for a minute inside the quiet, looking at my plants and my messy shoes, and the painting my friend had done of a city skyline. Nothing in the room had any shared history with her. It was all mine. The relief was almost physical. I met Alex at my book club about 6 months after that coffee, which sounds like the setup for a rom-com, but at the time it did not feel like fate. It felt like someone new being mildly annoying about literary tropes. She'd torn into a novel I loved with such articulate ferocity that I both wanted to argue with her and take notes. After the meeting, we ended up walking the same way to the train station, talking about everything except books. Our jobs, our siblings, the merits of pineapple on pizza. She made me laugh. This snorting, unflattering laugh I hadn't heard from myself in a while. I didn't see her as a potential partner at first. I'd sworn in a melodramatic, tearful speech to my friend Jess that I was done with relationships for at least 5 years. Alex was just a person I looked forward to seeing every second Thursday. We shared recommendations, swapped memes, sent each other photos of weird dogs we saw on the street. It was easy, in a way that felt suspicious at first, like I'd missed some underlying tension. The night I realized I was in trouble, we were walking home after book club in the rain, both of us trying and failing to share a too-small umbrella. She reached out, mid-story, to tuck a wet strand of hair behind my ear, and my stomach did that stupid flip I'd told myself I was too old for. I pulled back like I'd been burned. Sorry, she said immediately, hand dropping. Too familiar? No, I didn't know how to explain that my body had apparently decided to reroute all my trauma into a single shiver. I'm out of practice, I settled on. She looked at me for a long moment, rain pattering on the umbrella between us. Do you want to be in practice? She asked. With me? The old me might have deflected with a joke or blurted out yes without thinking. The new me, patched together with therapy and time and the memory of picking up my wife's phone, said, I don't know, but I like being around you. And I'm scared. Both of those things are true. Alex smiled, slow and real. Okay, she said. How about we start there? No pressure, no big declarations, just coffee. And if at any point you want to slow down, you say so and we actually listen. Who's we? I asked, half teasing. Me, she said. And the part of your brain that tells you you're being too much or not enough. We'll gang up on her. We did start with coffee. Then a movie where we sat too close and didn't quite touch. Then a walk along the river where I told her, in halting pieces, about Eliza and Rowan, and kettles screaming on stoves. She didn't flinch or talk over me or offer platitudes. She just listened, asked if she could hold my hand, and when I said yes, did. Being with her has been different. Not in a fireworks everyday way. In a way that feels like building something on solid ground instead of on the idea of who I should be. She notices when I get quiet and checks whether it's a bad quiet or a content quiet. When we argue, and we do because we're human, she doesn't storm out or throw past mistakes in my face. She says, I need half an hour to cool down. And then actually comes back. The biggest difference, honestly, is me. I say what I need, even when my voice shakes. I don't swallow discomfort because I'm afraid of being seen as needy. I don't roll over when something feels off and tell myself I'm probably overreacting. The night she went out with friends and didn't text me until 3 a.m., old panic bubbled up, hot and instant. Instead of pretending I was fine, I told her calmly the next day that it had freaked me out. And why? She apologized without making excuses and set a mutual expectation. I'll always send a home-safe message. Not because you're policing me, but because I want you to know you can trust me to think of you. Sometimes I catch myself comparing, involuntarily. The way Alex's phone is usually somewhere in plain sight, buzzing with group chats she doesn't care if I see. The way she introduces me as my partner, Hannah, with a little pride in her voice, not a casual afterthought. The way she sits with discomfort instead of papering over it with jokes. It feels unfair to stack these things against Eliza, who exists now mostly as a person I once loved and then survived. But my brain does it anyway, keeping tally, learning. I don't believe in cheating being a blessing in disguise. I think that's a neat phrase people use to make sense of random cruelty. Eliza's affair wasn't a blessing. It was a betrayal that carved a deep canyon through my life. But the way I chose to climb out of that canyon, that part, I can own. I built a new life because the old one crumbled underneath me. I went to therapy. I moved. I made friends who knew me as my own person. I learned to be by myself without feeling like I was waiting in a lobby for someone to call my name. Meeting Alex wasn't the reward for my pain. It was a good thing that happened after I'd already started doing the work. She's not my better half. She's my very good whole standing next to my very imperfect whole. That feels a lot more sustainable than trying to fuse into one person and pretending we'll never hurt each other. Every now and then, usually when I'm making tea and the kettle whistles, I get a ghost of that night in the kitchen. The bright phone screen, the smell of burnt toast, the sound of my own voice asking, "Who took this?" It still stings. It probably always will, a little, but the memory is layered now. On top of it are other images. Alex laughing with my friends. My tiny apartment slowly turning into a shared space with an extra toothbrush in the holder. Me, standing in a mirror I bought myself, looking at the wave tattoo on my ribs and thinking, you didn't drown. After discovering my wife's affair, I didn't just find someone better. I found a version of myself who doesn't accept crumbs when she can bake the whole cake. The affair was the earthquake. The rebuilding that was me. And this new life, this new partnership, is not a consolation prize. It's the house I chose to build on land I claimed as my own.